Hello, welcome back to the Prestige TV podcast feed. I'm Joanna Robinson, and joining me today by overwhelmingly popular demand, it is the queen of horny TV herself, Mallory Rubin. Mallory, how are you doing?
Joanna, it's the thrill, honor, and privilege of my life to be here with you to talk about this television show. Thank you.
I had the joy of asking you in person when I was in LA last week if you would do this.
Yeah.
And you were just sort of like, yes, where, when, yes. You were just so excited to talk about Heated Rivalry. And here we are today. It's Heated Rivalry, episode 5. Mm-hmm. And we'll be back again for the finale to cover episode 6. So that is your spoiler warning. If you have not watched up through episode 5 of this show, what are you doing?
Seriously.
It has been hyped. I saw it majorly hyped before I watched it. Same. And I watched it a little early. So I was just like, oh, dear Lord, what is going to happen in this episode? And we will talk about all of that. Before we do that, just some quick programming reminders. Rob and I will be back on Friday for Pluribus, the penultimate episode of Pluribus, and then back again next week. So you'll have a Heated Rivalry episode next week, and then also a Pluribus finale episode. In that Pluribus finale episode, Rob and I are doing just a little mini end of year mailbag thing. So prestigetv@spotify.com. If you have any larger year-end questions for us, we're just tucking that in at the end of the Pluribus finale podcast. So
Delightful.
Those are some Christmas week treats for you coming from the Prestige TV.
Can I send an email? Here's what it's going to say. Why haven't you started Landman season 2 yet?
Will I ever watch Landman season 2 is the real question. You had an opportunity to make me watch it, and you chose to make me watch Avatar instead. So that's on you.
I know.
Really.
Well, we have a podcast to make. It's pretty important that we figured out how to talk about Avatar: Fire and Ash.
One of the biggest movies in the world. I guess so. Okay, so listen. We have, we're only doing a couple Heated Rivalry episodes a lot. So we're not doing a special Prestige TV tailored email address. But Mallory, I wanted to give you the opportunity. If we were to have a Prestige TV email address just for Heated Rivalry, what do you think it should be called?
What an absolute honor it is to be consulted on this proud Prestige TV tradition. Okay, so I think a lot of the best suggestions and nominations for this very sexy, very spicy show. I don't know if that's what you want your email address to be, right? So I'm going to offer up a few permissible here at our corporate parent,
This is the home of John Ham's nipple rings at gmail.com. So
I know, but that's tame compared to some of what we could toss out here. All right, I'm going to give you a few, and then let me know if you have a favorite among the bunch, or any that are better than this, which you probably do. All right, we could just go, of course, with LillianJane@gmail.com. If you're in the know, you're in the know,
Sweet.
Ginger ale and vodka.
Okay.
@gmail.com. I thought that the fact that Ilya had the ginger ale for Shane at his place in episode 4 was one of the subtlest and sweetest ways to show us that he's paying attention. And Joanna, not sure if you know this, but paying attention to things is how we show love.
It's true. If you ever wanted to make me a tuna melt, I'm ready and willing and waiting.
So had a great crunch on that tuna melt, I thought. Seemed very, 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 very tempting. Scott Hunter is 100,000 years old @gmail.com. Got a real kick out of that text from Ilya in episode 5. He's like, there's no way that New York is winning the cup. Scott Hunter is 100,000 years old @gmail.com. Lucky Banana Socks @gmail.com. If we want to stay on the Scott corner for a second. What about Fuck You Alexi @gmail.com? Ilya's brother is just a terrible person, so we could cement that. And then I think we, of course, should consider and probably pick Square Peg Round Hole @gmail.com.
I'm going to yes and that and say my one submission to your many beautiful ideas was whole not peg @gmail.com.
Whole not peg. Well, there you go. It's like I'm the Rose putting out the first line. You're Shane building on it, coming up with the quote of the season. The quote of the book, as I understand it too. A favorite line that people were delighted by. Yeah.
I'm so excited to hear what research you've been doing into the book world, et cetera, et cetera. So this is episode 5. I'll Believe in Anything, written and directed as all these episodes have been by the great Jacob Tierney.
Yes.
Only one more episode to go, which is very sad. Mallory and I are famous for sort of pre-mourning the end of a show. But there is a second season that's already been greenlit. So that is exciting news. And as Mal alluded to, there's a bunch of books in this series. So Mal, catch us up. Like, how has your Heated Rivalry journey been going?
Mm-hmm.
I have the pleasure of sort of being there in the inception when you were like, should I watch this? And I was like, oh, hell yes, you should watch this. And we've been sharing like text back and forth, but like, tell the folks, how's your Heated Rivalry world going?
I'm having the time of my life. I think this show is fantastic, like genuinely wonderful. Very touching, very compelling, really well made, very sweet, very sexy. I had I think a fairly typical experience where it was all over my Instagram before I had watched it. Now I did watch it the week it premiered, like the double premiere drop, right? So 1 and 2
were
early,
yeah.
And I watched 1 and 2 a couple days after they posted. But in the previous stretch of time, one of the things that we like to do is always compare where our algorithm stands at a given moment. You know, how much of it is Stranger Things, press junket, and red carpet? How much of it is Heated Rivalry? Of course, one of the fun things that happened to me a few months ago was my entire algorithm was The Summer I Turned Pretty, even though I had not watched a second of that show. But such was the force
don't you feel like
and
you
might.
have?
Yeah, exactly.
Don't you feel like you have them? Yeah,
I consumed it through memes and Instagram Reels. Maybe one day I'll watch it properly in full. But Connor Story and Hudson Williams were everywhere. They were all over my Instagram feed in a way that was like, I felt like there was a draw and a magnetism to the experience before I had even consumed it. I was intrigued. I knew I wanted to watch. I consulted you. You said, definitely do it. Immediately, I loved it. I thought the first 2 episodes were really great, really fun. But I think that every single episode has been better than the previous one. I thought 4 was wonderful. I loved the Scott Kipp episode. 3, excuse me. I thought 4 was excellent. And the end where Shane and Ilya are, looking at each other across the dance floor at the club was just really electric. And 5 was masterful. Like, I just thought 5 was a wonderful episode of television. So I'm excited to be here to talk about it today. And it's like a little bit different than some of the other episodes. I mean, in this episode, we have 3 sexual stretches, but no explicit sex scenes. There's a difference in
cutaway.
The cutaways. So it feels like we are, evolving inside of the season, though I am expecting a number of very vivid sex scenes in the finale. We'll see.
Jacob Tierney, don't let her down, man.
No. That's the thing is, like, nothing in the show has let me down so far. And one of the really fun things has been not only watching it and falling in love with the characters. I've not read the books. I've sort of started to like learn about them, but also cautiously, because I don't want the outcome of this season spoiled for me before I finish watching it. But maybe I'm intrigued, and maybe I'll check the books out after I finish season 1. But just this is like driving so much conversation in my real life. Like, so many of the people I know, either our colleagues or pals of ours, are like, are you watching Heated Rivalry? Have you watched Heated Rivalry? What do you think of Heated Rivalry? Very rare thing in my life is that I've been out the last 2 Saturdays at holiday parties. As you know, I basically never leave my home. So interacting with, mingling with a number of people is an incredible rarity. Maybe things like this would happen all the time if I went out more. I don't know. But I don't think so. It feels like this is just driving conversation in real time in a notable way. And like at both of these engagements, multiple people were like, I want to talk about Heated Rivalry. It's just like the thing on people's minds.
These were Ringer adjacent parties, both of them. Yeah. And, it is a sexy queer love show, but it is also a sports show. So this is, pop culture and sports. This is ostensibly what we do here at the Ringer. So I'm really excited that this is something that people are talking about. And what's been interesting to me to observe is like, when my pal Richard Lawson was so nice to come on a couple weeks ago to cover through episode 3, we were talking about it as something of phenomenon. And I think it has just exploded so much more since then. Richard and I were texting back and forth about, there's like gay bars in West Hollywood who are screening episodes on a weekly basis. Like there's online controversies. There's, what has happened, with the actors and the way that they've exploded out of the show is just been like really, really fun to watch. And it's really exciting. As I always say, it's really exciting when everyone's watching a thing. And I agree with you that this, from the beginning, this started as like something very fun and sexy and entertaining. And then I would say, I think 4 and 5 are like, 3 was good. I think 4 and 5 are genuinely great episodes of television.
4 and 5 are amazing.
When we covered it up through 3, I was like, can I really make the excuses this belongs in the quote unquote prestige TV feed, which we are very fast and loose with that term anyway. I would not make the same, have the same reservations about 4 and especially 5.
Yeah.
I would say this is definitely prestige television. I wanted to ask you, master doctorate that you are in the ways of all things horny.
Thank you.
Something that Connor Story and Hudson Williams did was get matching sex cells tattoos, which I really love that as like a sort of, we know what we're doing here and we're aware of it and we're fine with it and you should probably be fine with it too. But what is it, do you think, about romance television? Like you just mentioned, The Summer I Turned Pretty was a phenomenon this summer, and that's in like the sort of more teen-centric romance genre. Or horny television, when you think about like Bridgerton or Normal People, obviously sex sells, this is a thing, but like, is there something going on that this is the kind of thing we really, really need right now? Or what do you think? What do you think is, or do we always need it and TV is just finally brave enough to give it to us? Like, what do you think?
I think like a little column A, a little column B, all of the above. Like, I love the tattoos. I love their relationship. I mean, they're wonderful together on the show, obviously. The show doesn't work if they're not wonderful together. Yeah. But watching them in all of these interviews and the way that the performers interact and have clearly bonded is just like, it's crackling, the chemistry between them in all respects. And I love that they have leaned into it, not only with this tattoo to commemorate their friendship and what this has meant to make this thing together, but this really unapologetic embrace of the sexual aspect of this story and of life and of like discovery, right? Discovering who you are, discovering who you might be with somebody else. Like that's can be for some people an exciting part of life. And like, I think people like sex, people like watching sex, people like reading about sex, as you know, because we've talked about this on our pod, House of R. The romance, like the romantasy boom in our universe and the genre side of things is like newer to me, but has been
eye-opening.
Wonderful to discover. Just absolutely wonderful to discover. Talk about something that's dominated my algorithm. Right. And, I think that like what you said is, do people always want this? I think, yeah, in some ways people always want it. Maybe there's something about this stretch of our lives where there's so much misery in the world every day. And it feels good to watch people like enjoy something that feels good. It's end of 2025, December of 2025, like 5 years since COVID, and people were alone and isolated, and like draw of being near each other and touching each other and undressing each other. It's just like every single aspect of it is scintillating. I think there's something too about like you read it and you have these really vivid descriptions, but also your imagination. And then there's something different about like watching a explicit scene in a show. But I think that the show is sexy in a lot of ways outside of just the sex scenes. The sex scenes are wonderful, but what can pass in a look or a whisper is also like electric in the show. So it's nailed every aspect of that.
Very like, there's a lot of yearning going on.
A lot of yearning. We love a yearning tendril.
We love a yearn. There's a lot of yearning going on. There's a lot of like smirking, you know what I mean? There's just like a lot of knowing glances, all this sort of stuff. That was always my understanding of why Normal People sort of popped the way that it did was, we were in COVID. We were all disassociating from our own lives and out of touch from each other, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that this trend has continued where the romance publishing genre, which you and I have talked about on House of R, has exploded, has always been something that was popular, but it has been like people are less covert about their love of romance and not, for the better, I think. Yes. Romance as a like, in the publishing industry, the romance genre is the most sort of like reliably selling genre, not to mention romantasy, which is, just even a splinter of that. You've got a bunch of stuff that's coming up from like Emily Henry and Ali Hazelwood. Like these romance authors are having all these projects developed, which we will see on TV like coming very soon. So like this is something that the people who make television and films are cottoning on, is something that people desperately want. But I think there has been, even post-COVID, just the way we live now is so disconnected. Yeah. You and I are like I think as close as people can be, we barely ever see each other. You know what I mean? We conduct our working relationship and our friendship through screens, you know? And that's just like the modern truth of how we live. So I do think that sort of that physicality, that touch, that embrace, that tangible expression of desire, and then also the humanity of it, especially as we're sort of grappling in this AI boom era. I think that's just like very real, very messy. You can't do this with an algorithm. You can only do it with another person kind of experience is something that I think a lot of people are interested in embracing right now.
Yeah. So. And I think there's something too, like, again, I will not deign to claim expertise on the genre en masse here. Like I just have not consumed enough of it in any form in the printed page or on the screen. But it seems to me my initial foray, and I look forward to continuing to discover more. My initial foray into some of the stories that have popped recently. Like again, I didn't watch The Summer I Turned Pretty, but I had a sense, I think, of what was driving the Conrad obsession and the collective burying of Jeremiah, right? I think that there are a lot of reasons that people find Reese and Feyre or Xaden and Vi compelling, but like one of them is the old Mark Darcy, like, just the way you are. That's part of it, right? So it's sexy to see people fuck, but like it's really sexy if the people who are fucking are embracing the totality of the person in their arms. And that is elemental to what we are watching here in Heated Rivalry, obviously. So I think there's something about that adds an emotional attachment. It's almost like our version as readers or viewers of the difference between like a relationship and a one-night stand, right? It feels like deeper in some way. And so people form a little bit more of like not only a desire to spend time in that way, but an attachment to the people that they're watching fall in love or just fuck a lot.
I think also the greatest trick that a romance story can play is the act of separation. How do you keep two people who clearly want each other separated? You know, and in The Summer I Turned Pretty, I don't need to go into the machinations of that particular love triangle. In normal people, it's sort of like these very deep internal psychological issues that these characters need to work through in order to connect with each other.
Yeah.
And here it's you know, the pressures of being public figures for Ilya as you know, better explored in this episode, being Russian,
right.
You know, in the first place. And then for both of them being in professional sports, being, you know, for Shane in particular, I would say we see him again and again doing these like product endorsement deals. You know, this is like a huge source of his income. Could he be the face of this cologne or this soda or this whatever if he comes out as gay? And this is sort of the story that they've told themselves that they cannot be. And then we get, of course, the Kip and Scott moment inside of this episode where they just see like,
so good.
Is this possible for us? You know, really good. We'll talk about that a little bit more specifically. I just want to hit a few more things before we get into this specific episode. Anything else you want to say about Connor and Hudson? I will say, so Hudson just got picked up by CEA. This is a big deal in terms of like, you know, a Canadian actor who has like barely been in anything is now being repped by one of the biggest talent agencies. Like that's how quickly his star has risen. Also, I've been hearing some chatter about sort of like, you know, Hudson is Shane and Connor. Rich and I talked about this. Connor has, I think, the easier job in that Ilya is the flashier character. And what Hudson has to do with Shane is much more reserved, repressed, smaller, quieter. And I was talking to a named friend of mine who was like, I'm not sure I think he's a very good performer. And I was like, I actually think it was interesting because Rachel Reed gave an interview where she confirmed, I guess, like a fan theory that Shane was like neurodivergent somewhere on the spectrum. And it really, and she said that she talked about this with Jacob Tierney and with Hudson Williams. And so like his performance is really informed by this idea that Shane is neurodivergent among all the other repressive things that are swirling around him. And I think there's a lot that he does with a glance, and there's a lot that he does with smaller gestures that actually are really impactful to me. But I'm curious sort of like what you think of these two actors and like their potential coming out of something like this.
I think it's one of those really fun experiences where you are exposed to people for the first time. I subsequently realized that I had, I guess, technically seen Connor Story and Joker too. But,
yeah.
How often are we all thinking about that movie? You're just kind of instantly like, these people are going to be a part of our lives and our shared experience for years to come. I think they're both great. Genuinely, I think they're both great. In the early episodes and early weeks, the Connor Story, I mean, Ilya is my favorite character. I love Ilya and Shane, but perhaps unsurprisingly, Ilya is my favorite character.
Right.
And the Connor Story performance really like blew me away in the first couple episodes. I was texting some people in my life and I was just like, I feel like this guy's about to become one of the, like a star, one of the most famous people alive, not just in the like, where are your Instagram followers in real time, though I have also been tracking that. And I will say one of the fun things about this is that they're like really staying at pace with each other. It's clear that everyone's following both of them in the same time, but we're banking this a tiny bit early. And I think at like the time of our recording, they were both already at like, 500,000. 2 weeks ago, they had like 80,000 followers, like when I started following them. So rapid ascent on Instagram. Which is an end indicator, but not the only indicator, certainly, of star potential. They're on magazine covers, they're everywhere. And Connor Story just felt to me like, you and Richard talked about this, the kind of like, okay, casting directors are going to be paying attention. You could just feel instantly like this is, what's he being cast in like right now? And I think some of it is that he is on screen to me just like a stick of dynamite. It's explosive and powerful and very compelling. And I think that his performance, I mean, obviously there are the very like, oh my God, you had to learn Russian in a week aspects of it. I loved the little wink inside of episode 5 to like, yeah, you could learn it in a week, like with no accent,
No accent, yeah.
Really great. Learning to play hockey and skate to the extent that like the actual hockey is a huge part of the show, which it really isn't, but hockey culture obviously is.
Right.
And the way that he is speaking Russian, like to my ear, which is of course not an expert ear, what appears to be flawlessly, I don't know, but it seems to me amazing.
I've gotten like a little feedback from people who speak Russian, who are like native Russian or Ukrainian.
I'm sure.
And they're like, it sounds a little like, Ruski to them, but
sure.
It reminded me of, I don't know if I've ever told you the story. I used to live with a Ukrainian and I would like try to match his accent. And like one time I called him and I was just like doing the accent on the phone. And I was like, how do I sound? He says, you sound perfect from wherever you are from. And like, it's just sort of like, it's consistent. It sounds great because it's just super consistent.
Yes.
And so I just like, we can buy in really easily. Because it just sounds like, consistency.
I wasn't
really
like surprised to see some interviews, in my Instagram algorithm where people are like, wait, you're not Russian, as like an opening question. And so I think that performance kind of like bowls you over right away and has become, in a way that I've really enjoyed, subtler and quieter over the episodes, as Ilya, the character who is more like outwardly, at least with Svetlana or Shane, this is who I am. It's okay to like what you like. It's okay to want what you want. But I can, as we hear him, just explicitly say in this episode, like, I can't go home to Russia ever again if I say this out loud. And then Hudson's performance is the one that has really grown on me across the season. And I was like so moved watching him in the last couple episodes. And I think that all of the things that you said, and just in general, like the fact, it feels to me right for all of the reasons, all of the aspects of Shane's life and his circumstances and like the things that he is navigating. And the fact that his journey is like a sexual journey and a journey of discovery and identity, but it's like a journey of understanding himself. Right. And so like the quieter, more reserved, shy aspects of it. I think the way that the show has made text of that inside of their relationship, where Ilya ribs him for being boring and stuff like that, is really expert and very sweet. And I just think they're both great. They're great.
It reminds me a bit of like our discussion of Heartstopper, where you've got one character who has come out and knows he's queer and one character who's like discovering his sexuality. And so like you have someone who's on a whole different journey. And so Shane coming to terms with his own sexuality is part of this whole thing. It feeds very much into the like romance novel trope of he fell first, he fell harder, like that sort of back and forth, which I think is really interesting. Last thing I'll say, and I noticed it particularly in this episode, I was already making this sort of like Hudson Williams, young Keanu comp in my head, these like Canadian hunks or whatever, but I really do think that they're styling Connor Story as Ilya a bit like Patrick Swayze in Dirty Dancing. He's wearing a lot of black tank tops in this episode, which is like classic Swayze Dirty Dancing to me, which then of course made me think about Keanu and Swayze in Point Break, which is, I think, one of the queerest movies that's ever existed. So I'm here for it. I'm here for all of it. One last thing I want to say before we get to sort of like in the specifics of this episode a bit more than I have, tank talks to the side. It's just on the business front, just talking really briefly. We got a really interesting email from our listener, Montana, about what's called CanCon or Canadian content. And Montana was just basically outlining the way in which, because of the various rules of Canadian television in terms of like funding you can get, tax breaks you can get, there's rules about how Canadian content has to be produced. And it has to do with like 50% of what's aired in Canada has to be Canadian homegrown. And also in terms of like sending Canadian content into the world, the impulse has been to be quite conservative. Like we don't get too flashy. We don't get too experimental with our content. We farm out fairly staid, I don't know, Ella Montgomery based content or whatever the case may be. And she said, you've seen a bit of growth in that area with like Schitt's Creek or Letterkenny and Shoresy, a show that I know that you really love.
Love Shoresy.
But she's like, this is just like a huge leap and bound to have Heated Rivalry, which is streaming here on HBO Max. So I'm sure plenty of people in the US just think it's an HBO show, and that's fine. That happens all the time. Who really cares? But it is a huge deal, I think, for Canadian television. And there was a really interesting interview with some of the executives behind this. I usually leave the TV business talk to Chris and Andy. They know much more than I do. But I thought this piece in the Inkler, an interview with Leslie Goldberg from the guys who sort of went all in on this show and took a huge risk, and how the risk has paid off for them, was really, really fascinating. So I recommend that as like, if you're interested in sort of what does this mean for the television landscape as a whole, no pun intended phrasing, but like, I think that like, sorry, I just said it and then I heard it. But like, I think the Summer I Turned Pretty and Heated Rivalry popping the way they did means, of course, we will get more romance television. We will get like more sex-friendly television. That's all great. What does it mean for like Canadian exports? I'm excited to see, like, I think it's really interesting. So last but not least, Montana did recommend, I haven't watched it, but Montana said, if you want more great CanCon to watch, I definitely recommend North of North on Netflix too. I haven't watched it, but it sounds like something I might want to check out over the holiday break. If it's got the stamp of approval. Anything else you want to say in a big picture sense before we get into specifics of episode 5?
I guess just on the time jump front, I'm like so intrigued to know that a season 2 is coming, because we start in 2008 and in this episode we're up to 2017. So we've watched these two characters in 5 episodes of TV, really 4, because they're briefly in the Scott Kipp episode in episode 3, but it's that episode was an orient around Ilya and Shane, and so we've spent a decade with them. And we have 1 to go. And the fact that there's a season 2, because knowing there are multiple books that are on multiple characters, I was like, I wonder,
like, how central will they
be in season 2? But like, they're so central to the fan experience and relationship to the show. It seems like everyone is just saying, we're doing a season 2, and Shane and Ilya's story will continue, and that there are ongoing Shane Ilya plots in the book. Yeah. So that I don't know, like, does season 2 take place over 6 months, or does season 2 continue to move us through time? I have no idea, because I haven't wanted to spoil it for myself. But I found it a little disorienting in the first episode to so rapidly move across the calendar. But now, toward the end of the season, it has given us this sense and feeling that we've lived these years with them, and have a deeper understanding of what they've meant to each other over time and what else has happened around them in their lives, even though like 5 hours of TV is just ultimately not that much. So it's been interesting.
To watch them go from like they're essentially teenage, right? They're like 19, 20 maybe in the first episode. To watch them go from like rookie of the year, or whatever the case may be, to captains of their respective teams. And to think about what it means to try to engage in this, both in time, in the history of like what it means to be out and queer in the US, Canada, Russia, et cetera, over the span of a decade, that particular decade. And then in your life as a teenager versus like someone who's pushing 30 at that point.
Right.
All right. We're going to get into the episode now more specifically and just say, first and foremost, I can't believe we've gone this long without talking about our babe from our Yellow Jackets coverage, Sophie Nélisse.
Unbelievable.
Who has a killer scene in this episode as Rose, but was, of course, very, very integral to episode 4. I texted you before you watched episode 4, and I was like, so Shauna is here. Shauna from Yellow Jackets is here. Here she comes. I loved this dinner scene. It was so beautiful. The way that both Rose and Svetlana inside of this episode, and the way in which all people, like, Hudson's BFF on his team or whatever the case may be, is just sort of like, yeah, like Jane and Lily, like, we get it. I don't care. Go do your thing. But I loved this scene. I thought it was really, really beautiful. And I loved the parting of the ways too, and this genuine, just sort of like, let's be friends. No, really, let's be friends.
Yeah, and then they're on the phone with each other at the end of the episode, and you have no reason to believe that won't be the case moving forward. Yeah. I also thought this was great. Always wonderful to see young Shauna. It takes me to the wilderness right away, of course, and it's not the only Yellow Jackets cast member here in our Heated Rivalry.
Correct.
So that's been quite fun. One of the things that I've loved about the season so far, and the Shane Rose storyline is one of the ways in which we got this, is just how Ilya and Shane observe each other's lives from afar, So if
via like social media,
when one of them is in didn't make it as far, like they're not fighting for the cup that year, the other one is, and they're watching on the screen, or a news conference, whatever the case may be, and
so happy for each other.
And everyone else is like, fuck Rose enough, And the way that Ilya, who can say all he wants, including in this episode, like, it's simple for me. Like, we meet up, we fuck. And then, of course, later in the episode, I can't wait to talk about that scene. That's not where he is with it, of course. The doom scrolling of every paparazzi shot of Shane and Rose, and comments about how, like, oh my God, this is our favorite couple and the relationship we're most obsessed with, all of it. That's just really, I think, smart as a technique to allow us to glimpse something that maybe they're not ready to totally fully admit to themselves.
Yeah.
The dinner scene with Shane and Rose, I agree, I just thought was like really lovely. And both of their performances were wonderful. I think that was one of the best scenes that Hudson has delivered inside of the season. I mean, the across those few minutes, the reluctance and shame, and I think actually fear, like somebody is about to ask me the thing that I've been afraid they're going to ask me, and then the palpable weight lifted that he has finally been able to say this to one person, and like, it wasn't just okay, it was wonderful, It was like just so beautifully and artfully captured. And then the hand over his mouth and the little giggle with like, the thing is, I kind of prefer being the hole rather than the peg. Just such a great scene. I really loved it. And I thought that from an editing and like filmmaking perspective, the stretch where Rose says, can I ask if you've ever been with another guy? And he just quick little nod. And then, have you ever told anyone that before? Head shake. Was it different? Yeah, of course. Was it better? And between each of those questions, we're flashing to different moments that Shane and Ilya have shared. And some of them are like, was it different? Was it better? They're tearing each other's clothes off. Like, they can't wait to put each other in bed and get in bed with each other. But like, one of the moments that we saw was just that quiet, tender little kiss in the stairwell.
Which is my favorite, like one of my favorite moments of the season so far.
That's the totality of their love story with each other in little glimpses. I just thought that was great.
I will say, so something that, Jacob Tierney has said in interviews is that he's like, this is this is expensive for a Canadian production, but dirt cheap for an American production. So like, he's like made this with very little money. I think this is a quite beautiful show.
Yeah, it looks great.
Like as Richard and I talked about, and as I know, like we're both familiar with Jacob Turney's work with Letterkenny and Shoresy, and I knew that he was talented. He performs on both of those shows. Writer, director, etc. I knew that he was talented. I didn't know that he had this level of sort of artistic eye necessarily in him, because that's not really what Letterkenny and Shoresy necessarily are about. Though there's some moments in Letterkenny that I would give that to. But like, I'm so excited to, obviously he's going to do a season 2, but like, what else is Jacob Turney going to get to do after this? That really excites me too. So, I thought that the way that scene is lit in this like golden glow and the hush intimacy of like a nearly empty restaurant. And even though they're like two of the most famous people in the world, they're in this sort of like beautiful private bubble. Yes. So often overexposed, but in this, like, actually, let's be honest, let's have this conversation moment.
A little cocoon of safety. And I thought even then just the transition to like walking outside to the street corner, but continuing their conversation was a good way of indicating, and now we take the next step. And then the next step, I thought, all of that was just, it's subtle, but it's very effective inside of the episode.
Here's what I can say with certainty about hockey.
Uh-huh.
I dated a hockey player for several years in college. Great person, wonderful, the best. Hands out of a hockey glove is some of the worst smelling things you've ever experienced in your entire life. Like I have no comp for it, and I understand that like all sports equipment gets rank. There's something extra level about a hockey glove. And so that has just been on my mind throughout this, just like thinking about the hockey hands. So that's my level of expertise I can bring to this. Mallory, you're more of in the sports world than I am, obviously. I know you went to a Shoresy hockey event
I did
this past week.
I saw our beloved Sudbury Blueberry Bulldogs in person, and it was electric.
So like, this is something that, I remember Bill talking to us about how the soccer looked on Yellow Jackets. How does the hockey look for you on this show? And then I also just kind of wanted to talk to you. I talked to Richard about this a little bit, but like, we're in 2017. Like, where are we in terms of like queerness and pro sports? Like, where is the level of acceptance, either in hockey or just like across, the pro sports world at this point?
In terms of how are the hockey scenes, like how is the actual hockey? So let me say this. I'm a sports obsessive. Hockey is the major pro sport I spend the least time with.
Sure.
I'm married to a passionate Colorado Avalanche fan. Colorado got a shout out in episode 5 in the Ilya Svetlana conversation. So that was fun. But growing up in Baltimore, like Baltimore doesn't have a NHL team, and I would never root for a Washington DC team, obviously. So I wasn't going to root for the Capitals. And then like when I went to Syracuse, they had an AHL team. So I went to a lot of Crunch games. I think it's really fun to see hockey live. When I lived in New York, I went to a lot of hockey games. I don't really go in. I've been to like one LA Kings game, just sort of sad to say. I've lived here for nearly 13 years. Anyway, so I don't feel necessarily like I'm dialed into, I kind of can't help but think about that when I'm watching a football show. Sure. Or a baseball show or a basketball show. It's not as top of mind for me watching a hockey show. I don't know that the hockey is the best, but I think that's okay because, again, it feels much more about the culture of hockey and the visibility of being a very famous person. They're supposed to be the two best players in the sport, and their celebrity is kind of undeniable, right? So I think the show is more interested in like, what does it feel like in that locker room or
at the ESPYs or whatever the comp is that
the
they attend.
Awards circuits. At the Player Hotel, at the All-Star game. I was glad to get an All-Star game here because, as I think I've mentioned to you before, I would like to get a Ilya Rozanov hockey sweater, a jersey, but I would never, ever ever wear a Boston jersey. Obviously, I'm from Baltimore, and Boston is a rival sports city, so I can't buy a Boston Raiders jersey. That's unthinkable. But maybe the East Team All-Star jersey.
All-Star
if they sell
jersey.
that, like I could consider it at least. And, also that's the moment when Ilya and Shane got to be teammates. Who's going to center who? Great stuff.
Would you wear Montreal Metros? Would you wear New York Admirals?
No, I would never wear a New York. I mean, other than Syracuse, where I went to college, like a New York City team.
Got it.
Absolutely not. Though I am a big fan of Hot Scott, of Hot Scott Hunter. So yeah, it's got to be the All-Star jersey. The Montreal Hollander jersey, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Okay. I would at least consider it. In terms of your second question about how the show is placed in time and engaging with its timeline, I think so. First of all, I will not claim like encyclopedic expertise here, obviously, but I think this feels very right and very real to me in terms of what any player would be navigating or thinking about in this time. But I think especially in the universe of Heated Rivalry, it's the MLH, not the NHL, but like it's the NHL, right?
Yeah.
So in the and they're Russian and Canadian, but the NHL, it's an American sports league. In the major leagues, the 4 major sports leagues: the NHL, the NFL, MLB, and NBA. It is incredibly rare still for a player to be out. Like I think a lot of sports fans who follow closely would be able, off the top of their heads, to name key moments where players came out. And like on the hockey front, I mean, so recently, Sean Avery, who played in the NHL for years, he gave an interview and he said like he thought maybe that this show could actually help encourage a player in the NHL to come out. Luke Prokop, who was drafted in 2020 by the Nashville Predators. He's in the AHL. He came out in 2021, so 1 year after being drafted. And when he did that, he was the first player to come out while under an NHL contract, the first in 2021. Now, I want to be clear that that's not the same as saying the first professional hockey player to ever come out. I'm drawing the distinction here between the major leagues. Mm-hmm. So that was like, that's notable, right? That was in 2021 and he was the first while under an NHL contract. In the NBA, Jason Collins, there's a very, very, very famous Sports Illustrated cover. He became, and this was 2013. So inside the timeline of the show, he became the first openly gay NBA player. He came out. There was a cover story about it. And he was the first active male athlete in any of the 4 major North American sports to come out while actively playing. 2013. Football, Michael Sam, outstanding college linebacker at Missouri. He came out in 2014 heading into the NFL draft. Now, I think there are people out there who would say he tested poorly at the combine. He was undersized for a linebacker. He was like projected as a mid-round pick. He fell to the 7th round. He was drafted. He was drafted by the Rams. He ended up playing briefly for the Cowboys practice squad, the Dallas Cowboys practice squad in 2014, and then he played in the CFL. So he became the first openly gay player to play in a CFL game in 2015. So inside the timeline of the show. And then more recently, Carl Nassib, he's a defensive end. He became the first openly gay active NFL player. This was a really big moment. He was playing for the Raiders. He came out in 2021. He played for the Raiders and then the Bucs while out.
I saw a great I guess I'm being served queer athlete content now on Instagram. So they're like, do you want this? So they gave me an interview where Carl was talking about, I don't know if you've heard this story, where he was like, before he was out, he was like playing a game and they were doing some maneuver. The opposite team was doing some maneuver that I didn't understand what he was talking about, but he was frustrated. And so I think he like called them gay asses or something like that. And he was like, 4 of them turned around and said, you can't fucking say that. And he was like, this was a real moment to me where I was like, oh, there are allies here for me. Like that made him feel safe to like take a step forward and come out. And I was like, oh, I love that story. And he was like, and I was confronted with my own ignorance inside of my own like queer experience, which is really interesting. I'm thinking a lot about, thank you so much for that context, thinking a lot about Shane and Ilya and the, if you want to call it, advantage that Ilya has in his bisexuality, in that he can like go out with his teammates and like have sex with a woman and like sort of like perform quote heterosexuality in a way that like Shane is trying to with Rose, but like really struggling with. But like in terms of like code switching and passing or whatever, like Ilya has this advantage of his bisexuality, not to like talk about things I don't understand, but that is something that I think is like interesting to think about inside of their different experiences. It's one thing to be gay, which Shane makes very clear he is inside of this episode. And as he points out, it's a different thing to be bisexual inside of this world. And I think that is, I think it's really compelling to have those two differences, with the biracial element for Shane or the back home in Russia element for Ilya, or all, or Shane's parents being so involved and supportive, but what kind of pressure does that put on you, with his like momager and all this sort of stuff like that. So I just think like, all of that context is really interesting to me.
Yeah. And I think, again, like that's certainly not a comprehensive list. When you and Richard potted, like Richard mentioned some Olympians who are out there, tennis players, soccer players. There's some MLB players who came out after their playing days. There are some active minor leaguers who have come out while playing in the minor leagues. There are more openly gay players in women's leagues. Of course, this is like, I think part of this is like this macho male locker room culture and the stigma and the fear of how you will be treated if you say, this is who I am and this is who I love. And I think on the one hand, we are, of course, seeing every day that there's more like acceptance and love and an embrace and more people who have grown up with really progressive, healthy, open attitudes about all sorts of things, right? Sexuality and gender expression among them. And that's great. But of course, there are still plenty of people full of hate and people who are prejudiced and bigoted. And that's a scary thing, even if there are a number of people around you who might surprise you by how welcoming they are, or you see acceptance all around you for other people all the time. I think that the show is right to acknowledge that for those guys in that position, it would feel like a massive thing. And I thought when without knowing that the Scott Kipp story was actually the first book, like when I watched the third episode, I didn't know that was actually where the Game Changer series started. It felt to me like, there are moments earlier in the show where like Scott's like, well, what did you guys just like say to each other? Or like, your boy, not my boy, right? All that. And it felt like, okay, we're going to learn more about Scott. It feels like I was not expecting a full standalone episode, but then when we got it, it felt to me like this must be here because because Scott is going to be the trailblazer, because he will come out and as like to Ilya's point, 100,000-year-old Scott Hunter, like old guard, that like, what a powerful thing. And it would be a powerful thing for anybody at any age and experience, of course, to be clear. But like, it felt like we were going to get this moment where Scott made this choice and it changed something about the league.
I don't know if this is context in the book. And it was really funny. When Richard and I did the episode a couple weeks ago, I heard from a lot of people saying how weird it was for them to have read the books and I hadn't. They were like, this is a really odd experience to listen to like a Joanna podcast where you haven't read the books. So Richard and I were like, will Scott and Kip come back this season or whatever? And they're like, you dummies, we know how important they are to the story. But I'm curious, like how much the fact that like, we keep hearing these people talk about Scott being washed up. He's at the end of his career. He's an old timer. So he gets the cup this season.
Right.
Does he then retire? Like, is he done? You know what I mean?
That would be my expectation.
And does that just change? Yeah. He's just like, this is it. I did it. I got the cup. Fuck all the like radio announcers in my ear during my runs and stuff like that. I get to smooch my boyfriend, and then I get to say fuck you to the league. Yes. You know what I mean?
That would be my guess. Is right. That's where
different
this is heading.
Stakes. Right.
Yeah, and I think that's another. It's kind of just a continuation of what we were just saying, where I think the show and this obviously the book, the story in general, this world, it feels really honest because my feeling, your feeling. I hope the feeling that many, many, many people watching this carry with them is like, it's so, and sports fans in real life, like this is fucking sad. It's tragic if you feel like you can't live your life proudly and openly. That's like a terrible, terrible thing. But it is honest to acknowledge that that's the reality that a lot of people find themselves in still, even when we would like to think that a lot of people have made a lot of progress and grown a lot. There are plenty of terrible people out there every day who make you feel like you can't be who you are. So yeah, if Scott is like, the episode ends with, I thought that everything with Scott and Kip was just wonderful. The camera moving just slightly in toward Ilya and then Shane, and the looks on their faces, like I
was like breathless watching them.
Oh my God,
Scott! Hearing the announcers be like, "Who's this lucky fan?
Is it a fan?
It's
big day for him." If so, it's like, buddy, you have no idea.
That's really great, and I want to shout out. Again, I already mentioned like Rose and Svetlana, but Elena, who is Kip's like BFF, who's there with him. Like I just thought that was like a really great character who's had very little screen time to like really sort of endear herself to me and make herself part of this story. But like I loved that. And then Ilya's like, Shane being surrounded by his parents as he's watching this, and then the Ilya phone call. Yeah. I do want to zoom back and say anything you want to say about the All-Star Game section. I was like particularly really endeared to the Ilya with kids in the pool
very
scene.
Sweet.
That was just like very charming while he was still being himself, but also just like very playful with these kids, and involving Shane in this moment was just like really, really like sweet. And and then the like sexy slow-mo he gets out of the pool and Shane is watching,
shaking off the pool water.
Yeah. Really good.
Listen, Heated Rivalry contains multitudes, but it is not a Heated Rivalry episode if we have not seen Ilya's astonishing pecs and or glutes at some point in the episode.
Yeah, the mole array on his chest must
unbelievable.
Be seen. Yeah,
so we needed that.
There's a shot in this episode when he's like brooding back home in Russia, drinking vodka, and I was like, "Why is your shirt off?" Fine, okay, sure, I guess so.
The hotel room convo that's a part of the All-Star Game stretch. We don't see the sex scene after the conversation that they have, but when we cut to Shane leaving, Ilya is shirtless in bed behind us. So we
the bedding is rumpled.
It's yes,
in disarray. I would say
it is. I really liked the All-Star Game stretch. I thought that the bar scene was another good example to me of like the subtle way to show us how their relationship has progressed. The fact that just like they are sitting next to each other for that long, talking and engaging with each other. I mean, these are characters who a few episodes, many years, but a few episodes ago, it was like anybody could see us.
Yeah,
like, why would we be talking? We're arch rivals, So little things like that. I thought that the moment where Shane was like, "Don't make fun of me, but I got a stylist," was just
incredible,
absolutely perfect. And then in the game, the fact that they get to be teammates for one beat here instead of rivals, and this question of like, they're both centers, so who's going to get to play center? And then Ilya assists on a Shane goal, and they get to celebrate together, and like that
smooches the helmet.
Yeah, the kiss on the side of the helmet. Like they're not afraid. They're less worried about who's watching and what people might think. Not because all of these big questions are not still present in their lives, but because there's a magnetism and a pull to each other. Shane says it in this hotel room conversation. He's like, I can't keep pretending I don't like you, And I think that this stretch captured that really well. Just that authentic need they have to like share life with each other and share moments with each other.
There's also a kind of classic romance novel progression inside of certain worlds where they go from calling each other by their last name to calling each other by the first name. So we like first get in episode 4 and that like sex scene that becomes like too real and Shane bails as he sort of cops to inside of this episode.
Yes.
But then you get the repeat of it inside of this episode when he leaves, and they're much more like, there's still unspoken things. There's still Ilya saying like, it can't be like this,
Right.
all this sort of stuff like that. But there is the just sort of like, good night, Shane, good night, Ilya sort of
that
moment in which they're much more settled. It's like in the throes of passion the first time, and then it's just in this much more settled version inside of this episode. Which is very
like you say
lovely.
goodbye to your person and you call them by their name. It's great. Yeah. So I thought in the hotel room conversation where Shane is like, I have this big thing to tell you, and Ilya's like, yeah. And she's like, sorry if I'm like boring, but this is a big deal to me. I thought all of that was great. And I loved in particular in this conversation about like what they want. When Shane said it felt like we were something, he's apologizing for getting scared and bailing, but he's like, it did feel different. It was different. And Ilya tells him, we can't be something. And I loved when Shane said, would you want to be if we could? Which just, I don't know, felt like such a perfect encapsulation of where they are. Like there are all these real questions but what do you want? Do you want me?
And Ilya not answering. Like Ilya does not answer that. In my head, I'm like, that's not what he asked. And then she's like, that's not what I asked. I was like, thank you. Good job for saying that.
Yeah. And then before we get to the phone call, which I can't wait to talk about, just the little moment here where Ilya kind of breaks and he starts to cry talking about his father and just the way that Shane held him and
he like crawls into his lap and holds him.
And then that's the moment that we cut away when normally we would be, the camera would be the third participant in their sex scene. It's like, because in that moment, like that's the depth of their intimacy. That's what the connection is.
We're not invited to that. Yeah.
Just loved that.
Interesting. Okay. And then we get, among many other things, there's the injury. There's all these things that happen. There's the tell him I'll be fine. He'll worry. But I think sort of like the last thing I really want to talk about is this phone call where Ilya is speaking in Russian and Shane is just listening. And what a beautiful thing for Shane to think of, just sort of like speak in Russian and I will like listen to anything. Anyway, I really did think that Hudson's performance here of just sort of like hanging on every word to like sort of see what you could understand from tone or word. I got worried for a second because I was like, well, he definitely heard Svetlana, but that's not like what he's going to say, or like, have you Googled how to say love in Russian? Because it's in there, stuff like that. So like, but the listening, and then of course, like Connor as Ilya performing and like saying the thing that he can't say. And he's in this like tunnel, graffiti, like laden tunnel, and just sort of like outside and not alone in a room inside, but outside, vulnerable in a space that is unfriendly to this kind of confession, saying something in his native tongue in a space where someone could hear him. There's no one really around, but someone could hear him, but not able to say it yet. To Shane.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if I said this to Richard when we recorded earlier this week, but I have said it recently, so I'll just say it again. There is a thing I do sometimes when like, especially when it's a show about romantic tension, and I call it like the Fleabag season 2 effect, where I just like lean closer and closer to the TV screen as I'm just sort of like, what's going to happen here? That's how I was like during the, in all the sex scenes, I'm like, I know what's going to happen. But during this phone call, I'm like, what is he going to say? What I really hope he will say. And then he does. And it's like, Shane doesn't know, but also does he kind of know? And it's just a really beautiful piece of television.
This was my favorite scene of the season. I mean, I just thought I was crying. Yeah. This was so good. And again, great Hudson performance across the season. I think in particular in this episode, when he's in the hospital bed and he's like drugged out, high Shane, he's like, hey, very great, the comedic range, etc. But I agree with you. I think these just like the camera just still on his closed eyes and the way that his attention is so apparent, right? There's nothing in the world more important to him than being present in that moment for Ilya in the way that is right for Ilya, who is the person in need right then. I just thought was like lovely. And you and Richard talked about the text messaging when you guys potted after season 3 and how, like, you know, that can go so wrong in a show. It can be just really a debacle in a show, and how this show has actually used it quite well, I think, not only to like give us little insights into how they're communicating, but obviously it unlocks the like, oh, how's Boston Lily, or, you know, not the way you love Jane, like you observed already, the observation that other people in their close inner circle orbits like have about who they're interacting with, even just as a way to kind of show us where we are in time. Like, oh, we're at the iMessage like blue bubble era, where, you know, like things like it's actually been kind of helpful, like going from emoticons to emoji. This was an even better example, I think, to me, of how the show has used technology to heighten intimacy instead of stifle it. Because, you know, and the deployment of technology in like a relationship can be just bad, but it can also be like a cheat. You're trying to like fast forward something that we don't totally understand, and in some ways that is maybe a reflection actually of how people interact in modern life, right? I'm old and washed and have been married for 1,000 years, so I'm not the best person to comment on how the kids out there are talking to each other these days. But what this phone call did, it's like, it doesn't matter at all that he doesn't speak or understand Russian, because this is asking us a question like, can you feel the truth for the other person, right? Can you sense what they are thinking and what they want and what they need, even if they can't or haven't said it to you? And that is, even though there are a lot of steps that they have to take together still. And, you know, the episode ends on Ilya saying, after telling Shane at the hospital, like, I can't do that. I can't go to the cottage. You know, and we had watched him. This is another how they watch each other. One of the things that he was watching, that Ilya was watching on TV in a prior episode, was Shane talking about his cottage and how it was like his favorite place in the world and the place where he felt peace.
Shane's Cribs episode, essentially.
Exactly. And like Mr. Real Estate. We called him that later.
And
so
Svetlana.
good.
Oh, something I didn't know that the book readers informed me was like, earlier in the season when they were talking about, he got this apartment, he got this one apartment in Montreal, and then he bought the apartment next door. And he was talking about how he's like, oh, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, et cetera, et cetera. It's an investment.
Yeah.
But what the book readers are saying is that he like bought the apartment next door so that he could like fuck Ilya up there, essentially. Just like bought. Does your sexual partner care about you if he doesn't buy out an entire floor of a high rise so you can just like be as loud as you want to be? It's
Where is our fuck palace? That's my question to every romantic partner from here onward.
There you go.
So yeah, I thought that scene was great, and the episode was great, and the show was great. It's great.
That's all I have to say about that. Okay, I'm embarrassed. I don't like usually love to admit being dumb, but here we go. It took me way too late to realize that like Jane sounds like Shane and Ilya and Lily are like close together. It took me like way too long to figure that out. I am like really embarrassed by that. But what I love inside of this episode, we understand, because we know how stories work, that like Ilya ignoring Alexei's like repeated phone calls probably means like he's ignoring something that's happening with his dad that is probably going to like, come back to haunt him. So that's necessary for plot purposes. But also there's just this sort of like, ignore and roll your eyes at every single Alexei phone call, but any buzz that happens to be Shane, you are like reading it, you are smiling and blushing at your phone, you are just sort of like enjoying your any crumb from this other person just like lights up your day. It's just like really beautiful. Last but not least, I will just say the finale is called The Cottage, and I'm like very, very excited to see what we see there. I mean, a cottage on like a private lake.
We should be fucking on every surface, indoor and outdoor, of the cottage and surrounding grounds. I expect to see sex. Shane, pain medicine Shane was like, we could have 1 week, we could have 2 weeks. Who knows?
I will say his parent. In the Cribs episode, they did say that his parents like summer home or whatever is nearby. So that is information we have. Follow-up question.
Yeah.
What will Shane stock the fridge with? Is it Coronas? Is he going to be making tuna melts for Ilya? Like, are we getting some like good vodka? What are we doing to show that we pay attention and that
It's a great question. Shane's like food intake, his macros have been a through line of obviously he's like, oh yeah, I'll have a beer now. But I don't know. I think the question is, Ilya seems a little more, I was surprised to see how it was like a lot of ingredients in Tupperware. Like he's doing meal prep as well. So I know. This is a great question. I guess some Corona, some vodka.
I was so curious about the stack of Tupperwares for the tuna melt. That means the tuna salad is pre-made. Okay. Maybe the cheese is pre-shredded. Okay.
Yeah.
I do that. That's great.
Lettuce leaves.
Do we put lettuce on a tuna melt? I guess
some people, because if the tuna salad itself is already made, then presumably, because you could have like some celery or if you put onion or something for texture, and then you're mixing it up. But if the tuna is already made, then what are all the other Tupperware for? I mean, I don't think
it was one Tupperware too many that I was like, what is this for? Do we? Oh, maybe like we put pickles on our tuna melt. I don't know.
Sure.
Anyway,
some crunch. Yeah.
Russians do love a pickled item is something that I know is to be true. Okay. Anything else you want to say about Heated Rivalry episode 5?
Oh boy. Just can't wait for the finale, but also sad it's ending. So that's the familiar push-pull of the end of a TV season that we've loved. The reminder that the parents are nearby is a great one, because my expectation, and again, I genuinely have no idea what is coming in these books. I'm pure on the spoiler front. I have no intel here. My expectation would be, to your point about Scott and how he was like, all right, I'm 40, I've won the cup. We had even heard him say to Kip in episode 3, basically like, I do want this like one day after.
Yeah, give me time. Give me a year. Give me a couple of years, something like that. Yeah.
And so I feel like there's going to be this surge after watching what they watched into the cottage stretch, and then probably a kind of a conversation, maybe exactly about that. Like, okay, but like he just announced he's retiring. He's out of the league. It's not the same. And that maybe that will cause some tension if one of them is ready for something that the other one isn't. And of course, you could come out without revealing your relationship with each other. But I wonder if the big move in the finale is Shane coming out to his parents. I don't expect either of them to go public in the finale if we're getting a season 2. That's just my guess based on the fact that season 2 is coming. But I don't know.
I don't know how the book, I think there are 2 Shane and Ilya-centric books. There's like a mid-series book and then towards the end of the series book. So I don't know. Same. Please don't spoil me via email or tweet. I don't want to know. But here's my guess, not knowing. I would say his dad, who when his mom was like, come to Wimbledon for the girls, essentially, and his dad was like, really?
Sit next to a princess, yeah.
I believe his dad definitely already knows. And I think his mom probably knows, but is like, so I would say his dad is going to be fine and his mom is going to have but the business issue with it. And what will that mean for their future? Stay tuned to season 2 to find out. But that's a guess that I have based on zero information from the book, but just based on like the breadcrumbs that have been laid so far. I'm excited for us for the cottage montage of every surface, and like definitely a lot of swimming montages. We got a lake right there.
Yeah. Some skinny dipping for sure. No question. No question. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Mallory Rubin, thank you so much.
Thank you
for hopping over. Talk to me on Heated Rivalry. Guess what? If you enjoy Joanna and Mallory talking about men in love who are separated and one of them's sort of flamboyant and a bad boy and the other one is a bit more repressed, we will be covering Interview with the Vampire season 2 later this week on House of R, as well as one of the biggest movies of the year that Mallory had to force me to see, even though it should be my job to see, Avatar: Fire and Ash, as well as a couple of trailers that are going to be, we're doing all of that as part of our annual gift exchange over on House of R later this week. We'll also be covering the rest of Stranger Things on House of R. So like, please tune in. And then of course, Rob and I will be back with Pluribus with the end of year mailbag, PrestigeTV at Spotify.com, not wholenotpeg@gmail.com. That is not an email that I have procured.
Yeah.
PrestigeTV at Spotify.com belongs to us. so does lickingthedonut@gmail.com. Mallory Rubin, you're just the best to ever do it. And I am so glad that you had the time to do this with me. Thank you.
Thank you for this gift. Thank you for this gift. I can't wait to watch the finale. I can't wait to talk about it together. Maybe we'll do a little check-in at some point if we read the books ahead of season 2.
Yes. I love that for
a
us.
Little book corner, a little book talk. Should we make a book talk?
Should we make I've been actually wondering if next year should be like House of Reads.
I agree. I've been thinking about it as well.
Yeah. Like a book club, like sort of thing.
Book club, book talk, reading passages, talking about stories we love, opening at long last House of Reads. What will we be serving? Will we have tuna melts on the menu at House of Reads? Stay tuned to find out.
It's a pungent aroma to invite into our lives. Thank you to Devon Baroldi for production work on this episode. Thank you to Justin Sayles for happily agreeing when I said, please let me cover this show on our Prestige feed. And we'll see you very soon. Bye.